Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Glad to be here diving into this one.
Yeah, so imagine for a second paying exactly €5.84 for a public ferry ticket.
Right. Pretty standard public transit pricing.
Exactly. You step off this, very utilitarian catamaran, your feet hit this ancient, wildly slippery, sun-baked marble dock, and you realize something.
What's that?
The boat tied up literally inches away from you is a €50 million superyacht.
Oh, yeah. The cognitive dissonance there is immediate.
It really is. So today we are undertaking a massive deep dive into Hvar, the long, stunning, lavender-scented island off the Dalmatian coast.
Which is currently suffering from a really fascinating and honestly incredibly expensive identity crisis.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because for decades, Hvar built its modern reputation on sunshine, those exact super yachts, and arguably the loudest summer nightlife anywhere in Croatia.
Right, it was the party capital.
But we are here today to unpack the actual, unvarnished 2026 reality of this island. Because right now, the moment you arrive, you are hit with a €2.50 per person per night tourist tax.
Which is significant. That is the highest of any Croatian island right now.
Right. And it's entirely by design.
It is entirely by design. And it serves as this perfect entry point into understanding the mechanics of modern travel in the Adriatic.
Because it's not just a fee, is it?
No, not at all. That €2.50 tax isn't just a revenue generator, it's a behavioral filter.
A behavioral filter.
Yeah, it is a very deliberate toll booth erected by local authorities to set a specific tone.
Like they're trying to weed people out.
Exactly. When you contrast that €5.84 ferry ticket with 4-star hotel rates in each Hvar Town, which, by the way, are currently peaking near €450 a night in August, you start to see the friction.
Yeah, there's a massive gap.
It is. The island is accessible to anyone, right?
Right.
But actually surviving there financially is restricted to a very specific demographic.
Exactly. And that friction is exactly what we are going to tear apart today.
Right. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. Our mission for you, the listener, is to map out the physical and economic reality of Hvar in 2026.
Which has shifted dramatically.
It really has.
Yeah.
We're going to expose the best windows to visit. Spoiler alert, you want late May into June or the back half of September.
Yeah. Do not go in July or August.
No, because July and August have devolved into an absolute logistical bottleneck. Yeah. We're also going to dissect the main trap almost everyone falls into.
Which is assuming that Hvar Town is the entirety of the island.
Exactly. When in reality, it's just 3% of the landmass, but it commands like 80% of the price premium.
Which means your experience is entirely dictated by where you drop your bags.
Totally.
If you are a couple wanting a highly curated coastal week and premium nightlife, well, the island is built for you.
Right. But if you are a family trying to stretch a budget or, a traveler making last-minute plans, the current infrastructure will actively punish you.
It will. It's unforgiving.
So by the end of this deep dive, we are going to deliver 5 definitive, brutally honest verdicts for the backpacker, the mid-range couple, the family, the luxury traveler, and the digital nomad.
I love it. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even begin to debate whether a €450 hotel room is justified, we have to grasp the sheer physical scale of the island's logistics.
Right, because geography is everything here.
It really is. This isn't some tiny walkable speck in the ocean. Hvar is 68 kilometers long.
That's a substantial piece of land.
Yeah, and it has a permanent year-round population of roughly 11,000 residents.
Okay, so a small town vibe.
Exactly. Yet, in the absolute peak of August, this island absorbs 30,000 visitors a day.
Wow, 30,000 a day.
Think about that math. And the craziest part, the vast majority of those 30,000 people are being funneled through one relatively tiny harbor in Hvar Town.
To really understand the strain of that, you have to look at the urban planning, or rather the lack of modern urban planning in what is basically an ancient Venetian town.
Right. They weren't building for super yachts in the 16th century.
No, they weren't. You have 11,000 permanent residents, which is the size of a quiet rural municipality.
Yeah.
In August, you are dropping the equivalent of a mid-sized sporting event into that municipality every single day.
That's a great way to picture it.
The plumbing, the electrical grid, the waste management, the physical space on the pavements, literally none of it was engineered for that load.
It's just overwhelmed.
Completely, because Hvar is fundamentally an agricultural powerhouse. It grows more lavender than anywhere else in the Adriatic.
And the weather helps with that, right?
Absolutely. It logs 2,718 hours of annual sunshine, putting it among the highest in all of Europe.
Which is incredible.
It is a natural paradise that is currently being forced to operate as a high-volume amusement park.
2,718 hours of sunshine. I mean, that is the magnet, right?
That's the main selling point.
That is why the superyachts park there, and that is why people are willing to endure the crowds. But let's go back to that €2.50 tourist tax.
Yeah, let's talk about the politics of that.
Right, because I don't want to just brush past it like it's some isolated administrative fee. There is a deep political and economic context defining 2026 here.
Correct. You cannot separate the pricing of the island from the current national policy.
What happened exactly?
Well, in January of 2026, Croatia's Minister of Tourism stood up and publicly flagged overtourism as a critical threat.
And they named Hvar specifically, didn't they?
They did. The rapid rise in prices was putting severe strain on local economies, basically pricing locals out of their own hometowns, and Hvar was explicitly named as a flashpoint.
So they actually did something about it.
Yeah, the government didn't just issue a warning, they legislated. By February 2026, tougher measures were passed, prioritizing a strategy literally titled quality over quantity.
Now, let's be completely transparent with you listening. We are looking at this strictly as an objective, factual reality.
Right, we're just looking at the data.
Exactly. We aren't taking sides on whether the Croatian government's tourism policies are politically correct or incorrect. We are simply analyzing how these policies alter the physical landscape you will step into.
Because it really does change the experience.
It does. Because to me, this quality over quantity mandate creates a massive core tension.
How so?
Well, you have this staggeringly beautiful island that is actively being re-engineered away from mass tourism.
Right.
Yet, when you look at the ferries arriving in August, they're still handling and still charging for mass tourism volumes.
It is the defining paradox of the Adriatic right now. The government and local authorities want Hvar to function as an exclusive high-net-worth enclave.
They want the Saint-Tropez crowd.
Exactly. The aggressive pricing, the fines, the taxes, these all reflect a desire to financially filter out the budget masses.
But they haven't stopped the boats.
No. The physical infrastructure of the ferry schedules, the sheer volume of daily ticket sales by operators like Jelsa show that the mass tourism machine hasn't been switched off at all.
So it's a trap, almost.
It has merely become vastly more expensive to participate in.
It's like taking a sold-out stadium crowd and funneling them toward a single turnstile.
That's a really good analogy.
Right. But right before they walk through, management suddenly declares it a VIP-only event and multiplies the ticket price by 10.
Yeah.
The crowd is still pushing through the turnstile, the volume is exactly the same, but now everyone is significantly more stressed, expectations are astronomically high, and their wallets are much lighter.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. And that stadium crowd tension isn't constant.
Which is an important point.
It is. This is where travelers make a massive miscalculation. They view Hvar as a static entity.
Like it's always just Hvar.
Right, but the island's identity is entirely dictated by the calendar. Hvar doesn't just experience meteorological seasons, it undergoes extreme economic and demographic seasons.
Which means the concept of the best time to go isn't just about whether you need a light jacket, it's about whether you'll go bankrupt.
Literally.
Let's break down the 4 seasons of Hvar, because it operates like 4 completely different islands.
Yeah.
Let's start with January through March.
Okay, the winter months.
The reality, it is genuinely dead. I don't mean peaceful, I mean medically flatlined.
Yeah, the locals are just resting.
Half the restaurants are boarded up.
Mm-hmm.
Ferries operate on a skeleton schedule just for locals. If you find a hotel, it's maybe €70 a night.
It is an infrastructural hibernation. The island is literally recovering from the trauma of the previous summer.
That's a good way to put it.
Then you move into April and early May. The island starts waking up. Visually, it is stunning because the lavender begins to flower.
But there's a catch, right?
There's a massive catch. The Adriatic Sea is hovering at a very chilly 17 degrees Celsius.
Oof.
Yeah, that is roughly 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Unless you're doing cold water exposure therapy, you are not swimming.
Definitely not.
Hotels bump up slightly to around €90 a night. It's beautiful for hiking, but it is not the Mediterranean beach holiday you see in the brochures.
No, for the brochure experience, you have to hit the sweet spot. And every piece of data points to late May through June as that window.
I completely agree.
The water temperature finally cracks 21 degrees Celsius, which is swimmable. The restaurants in Hvar Town are all open, and crucially, the staff are fresh.
That is so important. They aren't burned out yet.
Right. A solid 3-star hotel will run you about 180 euros a night. You can walk down the street without elbowing someone. It works. But then we cross into July and August.
Ah, yes. The period I refer to as the peak catastrophe.
Peak catastrophe. I'm going to push back on you slightly here, though.
Okay, go for it.
If a place is fully booked, thriving, and generating maximum revenue, how is it a catastrophe? I mean, isn't that the goal of a tourist town?
It's a catastrophe from the perspective of the traveler's psychological experience and value proposition.
Because it's just too much.
Exactly. In July and August, spontaneity is entirely dead. If you haven't booked your accommodations 6 months in advance, you are entirely shut out of the primary market.
And the prices just explode.
They do. Those same 4-star hotels that were reasonable in May suddenly spike to 450 euros a night.
That is insane.
And the infrastructure failure becomes visible. The queues for the Konsum supermarket literally stretch out the door, down the street, and around the corner.
Wait, really?
Yes. You are standing in blazing heat just to purchase a bottle of water and some bread.
Wait, if the Konsum queues are out the door and down the street, are you even having a vacation anymore?
Honestly, it's debatable.
I'm genuinely asking, what is the psychology behind someone voluntarily paying 450 euros a night to stand in a grocery line for an hour? Why do people subject themselves to this?
It's a fascinating combination of societal conditioning and the illusion of the curated experience.
Break that down for me.
First, practically all of Europe takes its collective corporate holiday in August. There is a deeply ingrained cultural expectation that August is the time you must be on the Mediterranean.
Right, the Italian Ferragosto, the French holiday.
Exactly. Second, we are dealing with the Veblen good effect.
Okay, stop right there. Explain the Veblen good effect for someone who hasn't taken an economics class in 10 years.
Fair enough. A Veblen good is an item or experience where the demand actually increases as the price goes up because the high price itself is the selling point.
Because it signals status.
Exactly. It signals status. People see the high prices, the packed harbors, and the celebrity social media posts from July, and it creates a psychological feedback loop.
Like if it's this expensive, it must be amazing.
Precisely. They perceive the extreme cost and the dense crowds as undeniable proof of value. It is the fear of missing out weaponized by the calendar.
That is wild.
You are paying for proximity to the hype, even if your physical reality involves standing in a sweltering supermarket queue.
Wow. You are paying a premium purely for the right to say you were there when everyone else was there.
That's the Veblen good in action.
But if you want to bypass the hype and actually enjoy the geography, you wait for September. September is the undisputed winner of the calendar.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the sea has been acting as a thermal battery all summer, so the water stays a gorgeous 24 degrees well into mid-October.
It's basically bathwater at that point.
Right. But here's the magic trick. After September 1st, the crowds drop by 50% and the prices drop by 30%.
It is the ultimate temporal arbitrage.
I love that phrase.
However, even within these broader seasons, you have to be highly aware of the flashpoint.
The specific event dates.
Right. These are highly localized micro-events that completely warp the island's reality for a handful of days. Take mid-July, for example.
Ultra Europe.
Yes. Ultra Europe Electronic Music Festival takes place on the mainland in Split, but the massive official after-parties migrate directly to Hvar.
And that completely changes the vibe.
It injects a very specific, very intense, highly nocturnal demographic into the island all at once.
Exactly. And you contrast that with the Lavender Festival in late June, which is focused heavily around the village of Grabli.
Which is much more chill.
It's much more pastoral, yeah.
Yeah.
But it still heavily impacts local traffic and accommodation. Then there is the Hvar Summer Festival running continuously through July and August.
But there is one date that stands above the rest.
Yeah. The single biggest logistical landline, the one that will absolutely ruin your trip if you aren't prepared for it, is August 15th.
The Feast of the Assumption.
Yeah.
In Croatia, this is a massive, culturally significant public holiday.
So all the locals are traveling too.
Yes. The domestic travel demand spikes so violently in a concentrated 24-hour window that the Jadrolinija catamarans, which are the absolute lifeblood connecting the island to the mainland, they routinely sell out 5 full days in advance.
5 days. So if you're like an American backpacker who decides to just wing it and walk up to the ferry port on August 14th, you aren't going to Hvar.
No, you are not.
You are going to be sleeping on your backpack on a concrete bench in Split.
Precisely. You cannot treat a highly constrained island infrastructure the way you treat a mainland train station.
Which transitions us perfectly into the mechanics of actually getting there. Let's talk about first impressions and arrival, because you can't just fly a 737 into Hvar.
No airport on the island.
Right. You almost universally have to arrive via the mainland city of Split. Let's look at the flight data for 2026.
The economics of reaching Split are incredibly polarized depending on your origin point.
So true.
If you are flying out of the UK, low-cost carriers like Wizz Air are running routes from London Luton to Split, starting at an incredibly low €56 one way.
€56. That's practically a bus ticket. But if you are coming across the Atlantic, it's a different game.
A very different game.
Scandinavian Airlines, SAS, is currently pushing round trips from New York to Split, starting around $427.
Which isn't terrible, but it's not €50.
Right. And if you are flying out of Canada, say a one-stop routing from Toronto to Split, you are looking at roughly 767 Canadian dollars round trip.
That disparity in arrival costs is vital to understand.
Why is that?
Because you have people arriving on a €56 flight standing right next to people who paid $800, both entering the exact same constrained micro-autonomy on the island.
That creates some weird expectations.
Exactly. But once you land at Split Airport, the logistics equalize. Everyone takes the airport bus down to the Split ferry port.
Which is pretty easy.
Yeah, that costs €6 and takes exactly 30 minutes. Then you face the water.
The catamarans, mostly operated by Jadrolinija and Krilo. If you are a foot passenger, a ticket from Split to Hvar Town ranges from €5.84 up to €11, depending on the exact route and time.
And it's a pretty quick trip.
Yeah, the journey is 55 minutes, and in the peak summer, these boats are churning back and forth across the channel roughly every 2 hours.
And the moment you step off that catamaran is one of the most meticulously engineered sensory experiences in European travel.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The sensory arrival.
Set the scene for us.
Because you've just spent an hour on this relatively basic functional ferry. It's mass transit. And then the ramp drops, and you step directly onto Hvar Town's Riva.
Yeah.
And it is basically an assault on your senses, but in the most intoxicating way possible.
It is pure theater. The geography of the harbor is shaped like a horseshoe, which traps the sound and the smells perfectly.
Yes. The second your foot hits the ground, you are hit with this wave of lavender oil wafting from the vendor stalls lined up on the street.
It's iconic.
That mixes instantly with the smell of wood smoke and grilled fish pouring out of local spots like Canoba Monego.
And then there's the noise.
Yeah, there is a literal low-frequency hum vibrating in your chest from 40 multi-million-dollar superyachts idling their generators right in the harbor.
Just burning diesel to keep the AC on.
Exactly. And you are dragging your suitcase over this stunning ancient white marble pavement. By the way, a quick literal survival tip: that polished marble is genuinely dangerously slippery. Do not run on it.
I have seen so many people wipe out on that marble. The architecture really forces a psychological reaction, though.
What do you mean?
Well, your immediate involuntary impression of Hvar Town is that it is significantly smaller than you visualized, vastly richer than you assumed, and noticeably louder than you prepared for.
That is so true.
This triggers a very predictable psychological pattern that we can call the 24-hour arc of the Hvar arrival.
Oh, I have lived this exact arc. Break down the psychology of that first day.
Hour 1 is pure, unadulterated wonder. You are captivated by the Venetian stonework, the sheer clarity of the water right in a working harbor, the sheer beauty of the people and the space.
You feel like James Bond.
You feel like you've arrived at the center of the Mediterranean world. But by hour 6, you sit down for dinner, you open the menu, and you experience acute wallet shock.
Wait, a pizza is €18. A grilled fish is $120.
Exactly. The financial reality shatters that initial romanticism. You feel a sudden surge of buyer's remorse or anxiety.
Like, what have I done?
Right. Yet if you navigate that shock correctly, the arc resolves itself. By 11 p.m., you find yourself sitting on the Jaka, the massive main square, with a glass of local Plavak Mali wine.
And the vibe shifts.
The oppressive heat of the day has broken, the lighting on the Cathedral of St. Stephen is perfect, and you return to a state of genuine joy. It's an emotional roller coaster entirely dictated by your proximity to your budget.
That is so accurate. Is the cognitive dissonance of arriving on a €5 ferry and stepping into a harbor where the boats cost $50 million.
It messes with your head.
It does. You feel like you hacked the system to get there, but the moment you sit down to eat, the island aggressively reminds you of the tax bracket it actually prefers.
Which brings us to the hotels.
Right. So let's talk about where you are actually sleeping when you process that wallet shock.
This is where we must dismantle the biggest myth of the island. Accommodation isn't just about price, it's about geography.
Explain that.
Your entire perception of Hvar is dictated by which zone you choose to inhabit. Hvar is not a monolith. The geography is the economy.
Let's break down the actual 2026 numbers for the 4 traveler types across these zones. First up, the backpacker.
The hardest group to plan for right now.
Yeah. If you are doing this on a shoestring, you are looking at the Green Lizard Hostel in Hvar Town.
Okay, what are the numbers there?
A bed in a shared dorm that runs between 42 and €58 a night.
For a dorm bed?
Yes, for a bunk bed. It's a 10-minute walk up from the harbor. It has a shared kitchen to cook your own pasta. But let me warn you, it is notoriously aggressively loud in August.
If you need slightly less noise for exactly the same price, the Villa Maria Hostel is the recognized alternative.
Good to know.
But the genuinely smart move for backpackers, the way to actually survive, is utilizing the second-tier option. Private rooms known locally as sube.
Ah, I've seen those.
You will identify them by a distinct blue sign on the side of houses.
Sobe. S-O-B-E.
Yes. These run between 50 and €70 a night.
So basically the same price as a loud dorm, but you get your own room.
Exactly. However, they operate on older economics. You usually need to book them in person or by phone, and you won't find them easily in the hyper-gentrified Hvar Town.
Where do you find them?
You have to look in the alternative zones, like Stari Grad or Jelsa.
Moving up a tier to the Midrange Couple. In Hvar Town, you were looking at properties like the Heritage Hotel Park, Hvar.
What's the damage there?
In the shoulder season, this is a very reasonable €140 a night.
Okay, totally normal.
But in August, that exact same room with the exact same bed skyrockets to €350.
Wow, over double.
Alternatively, the Ferro Bay Hill Hotel sits around €125 in the shoulder season.
For mid-range travelers who realize they need a kitchen to offset the restaurant prices, private apartments are a massive market.
Right, like Airbnbs.
Yeah. Properties like Villa Nora or Apartment Stanicic will cost between €100 and €250 a night during the peak summer and drop sharply to between €70 and €160 in the shoulder season.
Now for the family. The golden rule for families in 2026 is simple. Do not stay in Hvar Town.
I cannot emphasize this enough.
I don't care how good the Airbnb photos look. Just don't do it.
I completely agree. It is a hostile environment for a family dynamic.
Why is it so bad?
Well, Hvar Town is heavily pedestrianized, but it's built into a steep hill. That means endless, ancient stone steps.
Oh, with a stroller. Forget it.
Navigating a stroller there is a physical nightmare. Furthermore, the ambient noise from the bars bounces off the stone walls until 3 a.m., and the premium on physical space means any accommodation large enough for a family is astronomically priced.
Families absolutely must base themselves in the towns of Stari Grad or Jelsa.
Much better vibe.
A proper, spacious 2-bedroom apartment in these towns runs between €110 to €180 a night, even in the peak of summer.
Which is actually affordable.
And if you feel a need to see the superyachts in Hvar Town for an afternoon, the local bus is fantastic. It costs €4 to €5 each way and takes 20 minutes.
Finally, we arrive at the luxury tier, which, let's be clear, is the demographic Hvar Town is increasingly trying to cater to exclusively.
The VIPs.
You have anchor institutional properties like the Hotel Amphora Grand Beach Resort and the historic Palace Elizabeth.
What are the rates there?
In peak July and August, a standard room here ranges from €400 to €900 a night.
€900 for a standard room.
Even in the shoulder season, you are paying €280 to €600.
And if you want to bypass the hotel lobby entirely and do it properly, private villas equipped with personal chefs range from 1,000 to 5,000 euros a night.
Yeah, that's next level wealth.
But let's connect this back to what you said earlier about the zones, because where you drop your bags literally changes the island you visit.
Exactly. The zoning on Hvar acts as a self-sorting mechanism.
Like, it naturally segregates people.
It isolates different demographics into different physical spaces to prevent cultural friction. Hvar Town on the west is defined by nightlife, a massive price premium, and what we should accurately call super yacht theater.
Super yacht theater, I love that.
It is entirely meant to be seen.
Meanwhile, Stari Grad, which is just a short drive away, is a designated UNESCO heritage site. It has a totally different pulse.
Very chill.
It's defined by slow, quiet mornings, drinking coffee in squares that are thousands of years old. Jelsa, further along, is where you find the accessible, sandy, and pebble family beaches.
Then you have Verboska, which is a hidden fishing village known locally as Little Venice, due to its canals, offering total tranquility.
And Balason.
Finally, Sučuraž, located on the extreme far eastern tip of the island. It is incredibly remote, the accommodation is very cheap, but it requires a punishing, winding 2-hour drive from Hvar Town.
So it's basically a different world.
You are essentially on a different island entirely at that point.
So you've picked your zone, you've survived the ferry boarding, you've dropped your bags. Now you face the single biggest daily challenge. How do you avoid going bankrupt just trying to consume calories?
Food is the biggest variable cost.
Because the food scene on Hvar is fascinating. It is a literal tale of two cities operating on the exact same ancient streets.
From an economic standpoint, it is a dual economy in its purest form. You have the tourist economy and you have the local economy.
Right, side by side.
What makes Hvar unique is that these two economies exist sometimes mere meters away from each other.
Let's examine the tourist economy in Hvar Town first. If you want to sit at a famous harborfront restaurant like Garifel and have a beautiful grilled fish dinner for two, you will pay between 120 to 180 euros.
That's a serious dinner bill.
If you walk over to the famous Hula Hula Beach bar at sunset, a single cocktail is 15 euros. Even a basic margarita pizza, if ordered in a high-footfall tourist square, is 18 euros.
Now, pivot to the local economy. This is often found quite literally one street back from the harbor, tucked away into the steep alleyways.
You just have to wander a bit.
Take a legendary spot like Konoba Manego. You can order a full pika, which is the traditional Dalmatian method of slow roasting lamb or octopus under a bell-like dome for two people, and the total cost is 55 euros.
55 euros compared to 180. And the wine prices are where the gap really shows.
Oh, absolutely.
A glass of the local Plavac Mali house wine in a Konoba is just 4 euros. A massive board of Dalmatian prosciutto and local cheese is 14 euros.
The value is just so much better.
I look at this and I realize you are essentially paying a theater tax. If you sit on the harbor, you aren't paying for the fish, you are paying for the view of the 50 million euro yachts and the right to be perceived by other tourists.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
If you walk one street inland, you are paying for the actual calories.
The economic arbitrage extends heavily into groceries as well, which is vital for anyone not on a luxury budget.
Yes, let's talk supermarkets.
For self-catering, the two anchor supermarkets are Konzum and Tommy. They have branches in Hvar Town, Stari Grad, and Jelsa.
Let's run some 2026 grocery prices, because this proves how viable the island still is if you are smart.
Hit me with the numbers.
A 1.5-liter bottle of water is 75 cents. Contrast that with paying 4 euros for water at a cafe.
Massive markup.
A loaf of fresh bread is 1 euro and 40 cents. 500 grams of local prak, the Croatian prosciutto, is 12 euros.
And the cheese.
250 grams of pashiki cheese, the incredible sharp sheep's milk cheese from the island of Pag, is 6 euros and 50 cents.
A full bottle of local Plavac Mali wine from the supermarket starts at just 6 euros and 50 cents.
Cheaper than a single cocktail.
Half a liter of local olive oil is 9 euros. Fresh tomatoes are 3 euros a kilo. A half dozen eggs are 2 euros and 80 cents. And a 6-pack of Karlovac beer is 7 euros.
The math here is bulletproof. If you just commit to eating breakfast at your apartment and making a sandwich for lunch, rather than sitting at a harbor cafe, you save roughly 15 to 20 euros a day per person.
That adds up fast.
Over a week, that is a massive portion of your accommodation cost recovered.
But navigating the town successfully isn't just about understanding the price disparities. It's about understanding the evolving cultural etiquette.
This is Huge for 2026.
In 2026, the local authorities have completely lost their patience with disrespectful tourist behavior. The fines are severe, and unlike in the past, they're actively enforced by patrols.
This is critical. Do not walk through the town centers in your swimwear.
No shirts, no shoes, big fines.
Do not think you are the exception. Hvar Town now rigorously enforces a €600 fine for walking through the old town in a bikini or swimming trunks.
€600.
They've adopted the exact same strict municipal rules as Split. €600. That is more than your flight and your hotel combined for some people.
Additionally, there is a €300 fine for drinking alcohol on the street outside of designated restaurant or bar terraces.
So no wandering around with a beer.
You have to remember, this isn't Ibiza in 1999. It is a historic town where people actually live. The police will issue these tickets on the spot.
And what about tipping? Because tipping culture is rapidly changing across Europe.
It is. It's getting more Americanized in tourist spots.
Historically, leaving a massive tip wasn't a huge part of Croatian culture. But in 2026, if you are sitting at one of those harborfront, tourist-focused restaurants in Hvar Town, a 10% tip is now fully expected and factored into the staff's income.
Good to know.
However, if you are in a local, family-run canoba in the alleyways, it's still largely optional, though leaving the change or rounding up is highly appreciated.
While we are discussing the food scene, we must address the most prevalent named trap on the island.
All the touts.
Yes. When you are walking along the main Hvar Town harbor, you will inevitably be approached by touts. These are employees standing out on the pavement, holding menus, aggressively trying to usher you into their specific restaurants.
The rule is, avoid them. Just keep walking.
Emphatically.
Do not make eye contact. Do not engage in polite conversation.
The rule of thumb in behavioral economics here is foolproof. If a restaurant has to pay a dedicated employee to stand outside and verbally convince you to enter, the quality of the food is not speaking for itself.
Right. Good food sells itself.
But more importantly, the data proves that menu pricing at these tout-reliant harbor spots is consistently 40% higher than the exact equivalent meal at a canoba located just 3 streets inland.
40%.
You are paying a 40% markup to fund the salary of the guy who harassed you on the street.
So what does this all mean when we start crunching the aggregate numbers? When we stack the bed, the ferry, the food, and that unavoidable tourist tax? What is the actual daily out-of-pocket damage you are going to take in 2026?
Let's run the exact daily budgets. I want to stress that every single one of these daily figures explicitly includes that mandatory €2.50 tourist tax.
Let's start with the backpacker. We are assuming a base at a Hvar Town hostel.
Okay, what's the peak season number?
In the peak of August, you are looking at €107 a day. In the shoulder season, that drops to €75 a day.
To break down the anatomy of that €107, your dorm bed is €50.
Half the budget right there.
Your groceries from Consum, plus maybe one very modest canoba meal, will run €22. Using the local bus and ferry transit within the island is roughly €6.
What about nightlife?
One night out, strictly limited to 2 drinks, is €18. Renting snorkel gear is €8, and the tax is $2.50.
Wow.
That is a highly disciplined, zero margin for error budget.
Yeah, there are no €15 hula cocktails on that budget. If you slip up and go to the wrong restaurant, you blow 3 days of your budget in one sitting.
Exactly. Let's look at the Midrange Couple.
We are basing them in a Jelsa apartment to protect their finances.
Right.
In peak season, this runs €145 per person per day. In shoulder season, it drops to €105.
The breakdown for the Midrange Couple is an apartment share comes to €75 per person. A food mix, meaning heavy on groceries for breakfast and lunch, but dining out for dinner, is €35.
Add in transit.
Sharing a scooter rental for the day adds €15 per person. Taking 2 ferries or local buses is €8. A daily coffee and gelato allowance is €7, plus the tax.
That sounds lovely, actually.
€145 a day provides a very comfortable, authentic existence, but for a couple over a 7-day week, you are still looking at roughly €2,000.
And then we reach the luxury tier. We are basing this traveler at the Amphora or the Palace Elizabeth.
This is where it gets crazy.
They are burning an average of €555 per person per day in the peak season.
This entails their share of a premium hotel room at €280. Booking a private boat day trip out to the Pakleni Islands costs €120 per person.
Add in the food.
A lavish lunch at Garifol is 70 euros. Dinner at a high-end, trendy spot like Black Pepper is 55 euros. Cocktails will easily run 30 euros. And the tax,
Over 500 euros a day.
555 euros a day, is where you really feel the island's ambition to position itself entirely alongside places like Capri, Mykonos, or St. Tropez.
But there is a fourth demographic we have to talk about, because they've completely warped the island's local economy over the last 5 years, the digital nomad.
Ah, the remote workers.
If you are coming to work remotely, the off-season monthly figure, meaning October through April, is actually surprisingly manageable. You are looking at roughly 1,450 euros a month.
In the off-season, a solid studio apartment in Stari Grad or Jelsa runs between 700 to 900 euros a month.
Working spaces.
Co-working at local cafes that have upgraded to strong fiber internet will cost you about 120 euros in coffee and snacks over the month. Groceries and eating out will run around 550 euros. Local transit is about 60 euros.
And this is a massive structural... That budget absolutely explodes from June through September. I'm talking financially ruinous.
It's a fascinating phenomenon called economic eviction.
Economic eviction. That sounds harsh.
It is. The digital nomad economy completely disrupts the local housing market, but only up to a very specific date on the calendar. Once summer hits, landlords systematically kick the nomads out, or they raise the rent by 400%.
Because they can make more on Airbnb.
Exactly, because those monthly short-term rentals convert back to highly lucrative nightly tourist pricing. A landlord can make more in 10 days in August than they make from a nomad in 2 months in November.
The nomads are literally economically evicted by the summer tourist wave. Also, a vital warning for anyone planning a long-term stay. The tourist tax is often legally capped per island, rather than charged for every single night of a 3-month stay.
You really have to watch that.
You must audit your rental contracts carefully to ensure a landlord isn't overcharging you by applying a nightly tax that they aren't actually passing on to the government.
That level of vigilance is required everywhere. Because even if you have your daily budget perfectly calculated and you've memorized the price of pushy cheese, the island relies on a series of logistical landmines.
Let's expose these right now. There are 3 named logistics traps that catch thousands of smart seasoned travelers every single year.
And they're insidious.
These aren't necessarily scams. They are systemic traps that rely on you making logical assumptions that simply do not apply to Hvar in August.
Trap number 1, the split ferry queue. The mechanism here relies on mainland logic. Travelers arrive at the split ferry port in July. They haven't pre-booked a ticket because they assume, much like a train network in Germany or a bus in Spain, that same-day walk-up tickets are easily available.
I just buy a ticket when I get there. Famous last words.
The reality is brutal.
The 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 4 p.m. Krilo and Jedrilinica catamarans to Hvar Town universally sell out from roughly June 20th straight through to September 10th.
Weeks in advance.
If you walk up to that kiosk with your luggage, you will be left stranded on the blistering concrete dock until the next available departure, which could literally be 4 or 5 hours later.
The fix is non-negotiable. You must book online using the Jelsa website or an aggregator like Ferry Hopper at least 48 hours in advance during the shoulder season, and an absolute minimum of 7 days ahead in the peak season.
And a pro tip from bitter personal experience, screenshot the QR code on your phone the moment you buy it.
Yes, do not rely on your email app.
The thousands of people crowding the port cause the local cell data signal to overload and drop constantly. You do not want to be at the front of a hostile boarding line, unable to load the ticket that proves you have a seat.
Trap number 2 is what the industry calls the car ferry upsell. The mechanism begins not on the island, but at the rental car desks at Split Airport.
Oh, I hate this one.
When you are picking up your car for a broader Croatian road trip, the agent will quietly, helpfully suggest that taking your rental car over to Hvar will give you so much more flexibility to explore the hidden beaches.
Wait, I'm going to push back on that. Why is that a trap? Having a car to explore a 68-kilometer island sounds like objectively good advice.
It sounds perfectly logical until you encounter the economic and spatial reality. Taking a standard vehicle on the Split to Stari Grad car ferry costs 56 euros one way in high season.
Wow.
That is 112 euros return just for the car, not including the passengers. Furthermore, Hvar Town itself is completely pedestrianized. You cannot drive up to your hotel.
You literally can't get to the door.
Right. You are forced to park outside the old town walls in municipal lots, which will bleed you for 20 euros a day.
So you pay over 100 euros to bring the car over, just to pay 20 euros a day to let it sit in a dirt lot while you walk everywhere. That is infuriating.
Exactly. It is an immense drain on your budget for an asset you will barely utilize. The structural fix is to leave your mainland rental car in a secure long-term parking lot in Split, which costs about 12 euros a day.
And then just take the cheap ferry.
Take the €5.84 foot passenger catamaran. If you decide you genuinely need wheels to explore the lavender fields or Stari Grad, simply rent a local scooter in Hvar Town for 30 euros a day.
So much better.
It's drastically cheaper, infinitely easier to park, and provides a much more visceral way to experience the coastline.
Trap number 3 is the one that really gets under my skin because it feels malicious. It's the Pakleni Islands taxi boat extortion.
Oh, this one is rough.
The Pakleni Islands are this stunning, uninhabited chain of islets just off the coast of Hvar Town. You go down to the harbor in the morning, and local independent skippers will quote you a very reasonable 10 euros per person for a return transfer out to popular beaches like Parmigiana or Jerusalem.
The mechanism here relies on you being relaxed, trusting, and off your guard.
What happens?
The reality is that when you want to return to Hvar Town later in the afternoon, especially if the crowds are thinning out after 5 p.m. and the sun is dipping, that original skipper you paid is mysteriously nowhere to be found.
Conveniently vanish.
Other boat operators sitting at the dock will then casually quote you 15 to 25 euros per person for the 5-minute ride back. You are essentially stranded on a remote island with no other way across the water, so you pay the ransom.
It is basically a hostage situation. You have zero leverage. I cannot believe how common this micro-extortion is allowed to be. Why doesn't the municipality shut this down?
Because a high-demand, high-stress, loosely regulated environment breeds opportunistic microeconomies. The independent boat operators know the supply of desperate, sun-drunk tourists wanting to go home is infinite, and the enforcement is lax.
So how do you avoid it?
The fix here is critical to your budget and your sanity. Only use the official yellow taxi boats that have clearly posted municipal price boards.
Do not negotiate.
Do not rely on verbal handshake agreements with guys holding clipboards. Get the exact return time and the full return price confirmed in writing or via a printed receipt before you step onto the boat.
When you're stranded at 5 p.m. because a taxi boat captain just doubled the fare, you realize you're completely at the mercy of the island's environment. And that sense of vulnerability extends far beyond your wallet. It brings up the very real question of physical safety.
Which is a valid concern.
Is Hvar actually safe, or are you constantly fighting off scammers and pickpockets?
If we look at the macro data, Croatia remains one of the top-tier safest countries in all of Europe, and Hvar sits near the very top of that national safety table.
So it's not a crime hotbed.
Violent crime against tourists is exceedingly rare. However, the perception of safety is often misaligned with the actual risks. We have to establish the real hierarchy of dangers, which are primarily environmental and accidental, not criminal.
Right. People assume the biggest danger is a bar fight, but the local hospital is actually full of people who underestimated the environment.
So true.
Let's list the real dangers. The absolute biggest risk is sunstroke. The sun on that white stone is relentless, and people drink alcohol all day without hydrating.
The stone literally reflects the heat back up at you.
The second biggest risk is slipping and violently falling on those beautifully polished marble streets in the old town. When it rains or even when there's morning dew, it is like walking on black ice.
The third major risk involves the scooter rentals we just recommended.
Oh, no.
The local rental shops will happily hand over the keys to a 50cc scooter without giving any functional safety briefing to tourists who have never ridden a motorcycle in their lives.
And the roads are intense.
The roads are winding, steep, and shared with massive delivery trucks. The accident rate is predictably high.
The fourth risk is marine stepping on a sea urchin spike when entering the water off the rocky coastline.
I've done that. It's awful.
The Adriatic is incredibly clean, which means urchins thrive. Stepping on one is excruciatingly painful and can ruin a week of walking. It's entirely avoided by spending 10 euros on ugly rubber water shoes.
Totally worth the 10 euros.
And the fifth risk, finally, is petty theft. But it rarely happens in the town itself. It primarily occurs during the chaotic, shoulder-to-shoulder boarding process on the crowded catamarans at the port.
If we break this down by specific demographics, the safety profile is highly reassuring.
What about solo female travelers?
For a solo female traveler, Hvar is deeply comfortable, both day and night. The only localized caveat is to avoid venues like the Carpe Diem Beach Club or the Kiva Bar around 2 a.m. in peak August.
Just because of the alcohol.
The drinking culture there gets exceedingly heavy, the crowds are uncomfortably dense, and the atmosphere can shift from fun to aggressive. But if you stick to the Jaka Square and the Riva Promenade, you will feel perfectly secure.
For families, as we discussed with the zones, safety is entirely dependent on infrastructure. It is a great, highly safe experience if you are based in Jelsa, utilizing pebble beaches like Mina and Grebišić, which have shallow, calm water where kids can play.
But not in Hvar Town.
It is an actively miserable and unsafe feeling experience for families with toddlers in Hvar Town, purely due to the steep stone steps, the absolute lack of pram accessibility, and very little natural shade.
A critical point on safety is understanding the medical logistics. If you do get hurt, say, you wipe out on a scooter or have a severe allergic reaction, what is the infrastructure?
Is there a hospital?
Hvar does have a small local clinic capable of handling basic emergencies, stitches, and dehydration. But for any severe trauma cases requiring surgery or advanced imaging, you have to be evacuated to the KBC hospital in Split.
Which means a boat ride.
That involves a 55-minute emergency catamaran ride, followed by a 15-minute ambulance ride on the mainland.
That is a sobering reality of island travel. It is worth noting for our European Union and UK listeners that if you carry a valid GHIC card, you are entitled to free emergency medical treatment within the state system.
Very important detail.
But beyond physical safety, there are a few named psychological scams you need to look out for.
Yes, these are low-level grifts that target your convenience. First is the official sunbed attendants at places near Hula Beach Bar.
What do they do?
These individuals will confidently and aggressively charge you 40 euros for lounger. That is actually completely free to the first 20 arrivals by municipal law. They are simply acting with authority, hoping you don't know the local policy.
And my absolute favorite grift is the closed museum routine.
It's so clever.
You'll be sweating, walking up the steep hill toward the Fortica Spanish fortress, and a very friendly, well-dressed local will approach you. They will inform you with deep regret that the fortress is actually shut today due to unexpected maintenance.
Oh, what a shame.
But what incredible luck, they happen to be a guide who can pivot and sell you a private walking tour of the lower town instead.
This is a classic psychological misdirection. It preys directly on the traveler's anxiety of a ruined itinerary and wasted physical effort.
You just want to win at that point.
The scammer positions themselves not as a salesman, but as the savior of your afternoon. They establish immediate unearned trust, which they then instantly monetize. And of course, the fortress is absolutely not closed.
No, it is open every single day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. throughout the summer.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah. So what does this all mean? When you weigh the threat of sunstroke, the treacherous marble, the scooter crashes, and having to constantly keep your guard up against fake museum closures and taxi boat hostage situations, does the stress of navigating this friction outweigh the actual relaxation of the vacation?
To accurately answer that, we must strip away the Instagram filters and look objectively at what parts of the island actually deliver on the immense hype and what parts wildly, undeniably disappoint.
Let's start with the absolute best moments. The undeniable highs that make you stop and say, okay, despite the prices, this is why I came.
Number one is that sunset walk up to the Fortica Fortress above Hvar Town.
Yes, the view.
Yes, it costs 10 euros to enter, but it legitimately offers one of the greatest panoramic sweeping views of the entire Adriatic Sea and the Pakleni archipelago.
Another absolute standout is an early morning kayak trip from the Riva across the channel to Jerusalem on the Pakleni Islands.
The operative mechanism here is time you must leave the dock at 7 a.m.
Right.
By doing so, you completely bypass the armada of massive tourist boats that launch at 10 a.m. The water is perfectly glass, the silence is profound, and you experience the raw geography as it was originally meant to be experienced.
I love that. It's about hacking the schedule. And for food, the high point isn't a Michelin-starred meal. It's getting a €6 glass of Plavac Mali wine at Canoba Monego, where the family's grandmother is literally still sitting in the corner running the till.
That's real culture.
It feels deeply authentic because it hasn't been corporatized. Or taking a drive up to the lavender fields above Velo Grobli in late June. The scent fills the entire valley. It's intoxicating. And finally, taking a day trip out to the green caves at the neighboring island of Ys. It is breathtakingly beautiful.
But we promise brutal honesty. which means we must address the profound disappointments, the experiences that trade entirely on legacy hype, but fail to deliver value.
Let's name names. The things you should absolutely skip. Number 1, Hula Hula Beach Bar, anytime after 3 p.m. in August.
Total nightmare.
The reality is not a chic, relaxed sunset experience. It is a suffocating scrum of sweaty, sunburned tourists shouting over aggressively loud, terrible music, while you wait 20 minutes to pay 18 euros for a watered-down cocktail just to stare at the back of someone's head instead of the sun going down.
Carpe diem on Stepanska Island is another major letdown for a vast portion of modern travelers.
It's just so expensive.
You pay a 35 euro water taxi fee just to cross the water to get there, plus a 25 euro cover charge at the door. And what you find inside is essentially a 2008 nightclub that has been trapped in amber.
Like it hasn't updated its playlist.
The music, the aggressive VIP table culture, the pricing structure, it hasn't evolved in 15 years. It just relies on legacy brand recognition and the sunk cost fallacy of the people who already paid the ferry fee to get there.
And here's the most ironic, frustrating disappointment of all. You travel to Hvar, the self-proclaimed lavender capital of the Adriatic. You walk up to the beautiful market stalls to buy the world-famous Hvar lavender souvenirs to take home.
And what do you find?
You discover that a massive portion of it is actually cheap lavender, imported in bulk from France, and simply rebottled locally in tiny glass vials.
That specific detail perfectly encapsulates the core tension of the island.
How so?
The sheer volume of tourist demand for authenticity has vastly outstripped the local agricultural supply. So the market simply imports a facsimile of authenticity to satisfy the tourists who don't know any better.
Even the fortress view has a catch. The Tirata Fortica Cafe at peak sunset sounds incredibly romantic. The reality, you are paying 6 euros for a tiny lukewarm espresso while standing in a tense 40-person queue just to get a seat.
But amidst the noise, the crowds, and the imported French lavender, there is one standout architectural element that rarely disappoints: the grota.
Oh, the grota.
This is the intricate, labyrinthine network of old town alleyways rising steeply up the hill above the Jaka Square.
The grota is pure magic. If you walk through it at 10 a.m. while everyone else is sleeping off their hangovers, it is completely quiet, cool, and shadowed. And at 10 p.m., the way the ambient warm light hits the ancient rough stone walls is cinematic.
Notice the overarching pattern here.
Yeah.
The absolute best, most memorable moments on this island, the 7 a.m. kayak, the quiet morning alleyways, the grandmother at the canoba, require either rising very early to defeat the crowds or stepping just slightly off the main, highly monetized path.
The heavily advertised, hyper-visible experiences are exactly the ones that disappoint the most. Which brings up a vital, existential question for anyone planning a trip. If dealing with the supermarket queues, the fake French lavender, the hyperinflated prices, and the sheer exhaustion of navigating August sounds like way too much friction, is there a plan B?
There is always a plan B.
If I want the stunning Dalmatian coast experience, the clear water, the history, do I actually need to go to Hvar in 2026?
You absolutely do not. And understanding the viable alternatives is crucial for any traveler who feels priced out or stressed out by Hvar. Let's examine two specific islands that offer distinct strategic advantages. Alternative 1 is the island of Vis.
Vis is about 2 hours further out into the Adriatic by ferry from Split. It's smaller. It is incredibly rich in military history.
It has a fascinating backstory.
And the reason for that history is fascinating. It was completely closed off to foreign visitors for decades following World War II because it served as a highly secretive Yugoslav military base.
That military isolation wasn't just a political footnote. It essentially froze the island's commercial development in time. Crucially, Vis has no international airport connections, and it has absolutely zero superyacht scene because the infrastructure simply doesn't exist to support them.
So it's much quieter.
The water is the exact same stunning crystalline turquoise as Hvar, but the economics are entirely different. You can easily find a charming, impeccably clean 2-star guest house for around 85 euros a night.
Wow, that's half the price.
A fantastic, authentic canoba dinner for 2 people will reliably come in under 50 euros total.
People always say that going to Vis is like experiencing Hvar 20 years ago, before the global hype machine found it. It's wild, it's rugged, it's authentic.
But there's a trade-off.
The trade-off is severe. There is zero nightlife. If you want to put on a linen shirt and party until 4 a.m., Vis will bore you to tears. But if you want a quiet, stunning retreat where you can read a book in peace, it's perfect. What about Alternative 2? Alternative 2 is Korčula. It sits much further south, closer down the coast toward Dubrovnik. Korčula offers a spectacular walled old town that juts out into the sea. It is frequently and accurately referred to as a mini Dubrovnik.
And it has the Marco Polo connection.
It also leans heavily into its historical branding as the reputed birthplace of Marco Polo.
And the numbers for Korčula are staggering when you stack them directly against Hvar, that tourist tax we've been talking about. In Korčula, it's only €1.80.
Much more reasonable.
Across the board, whether you are looking at Airbnbs, hotels, or restaurants, accommodations in Korčula are at least 25% cheaper than Hvar during the exact same peak season weeks. Plus, it has excellent direct catamaran connections to both Split in the north and Dubrovnik in the south, making it incredibly easy to logically route into a broader Croatian itinerary. If you analyze the life cycle of any Mediterranean destination, you see a clear, inevitable pattern. Places evolve from being untouched and remote to being discovered by intrepid backpackers and sailors to becoming mainstream tourist hubs, and finally, transitioning into exclusive, hyper-expensive luxury enclaves.
Where do these islands sit on that curve?
VS is currently in the late stages of the discovered phase. Hvar has firmly and unapologetically entered the exclusive luxury enclave phase. Korčula sits very comfortably in the middle as a mainstream, highly functional hub.
At what point do we just admit that Korčula is objectively the smarter choice for 80% of the people listening to this?
Oh.
I mean, it gives you the jaw-dropping beauty, the dense medieval charm, the incredible water, but with a significantly lower price tag and virtually none of the exhausting, thumping party noise that keeps you up at night.
For a vast majority of travelers who are simply seeking a balanced, beautiful Mediterranean vacation, Korčula represents a far more rational allocation of both their money and their limited vacation time. Hvar is a specific tool for a specific job. Korčula is the better all-rounder.
Which brings us to the ultimate breakdown. It is time to deliver the final verdicts. After tearing down the logistics, the scams, the costs, the government policies, and the alternatives, who should actually click the book button on Hvar in 2026?
Let's run the final matrix and let's keep this conversational.
Let's begin with the backpacker.
The verdict is yes, but with extreme conditions.
Heavy, heavy conditions. So if you're backpacking, are we telling you to skip it? Not necessarily, but you're playing the game on hard mode.
Very hard mode.
You should only attempt this in late May, early June, or the second half of September. If you go, you must commit entirely to staying at the Green Lizard Hostel or hunting down a private blue sign sobe room in Stari Grad.
You have to be disciplined.
You must buy your calories at the Konsum supermarket, and you must strictly rely on the €5.84 public ferry rather than taking any private transfers.
If a backpacker attempts to visit Hvar in peak August, this island will systematically destroy a €70 a day budget inside of 48 hours. The infrastructure simply will not support budget travel during that window. The friction is too high.
Next verdict, the Midrange Couple.
The verdict here is an emphatic yes.
Yes, right, because this is the exact demographic that modern Hvar is actively built for.
They are the target audience.
A budget of €145 per person per day in the shoulder season buys you a deeply satisfying, highly aesthetic experience. You get a nice apartment in Jelsa, a scooter to explore the winding roads for the day, a boat trip out to the Pakleni Islands, and you can comfortably afford 2 proper sit-down Canoba dinners.
But again, avoid peak August. In August, that exact same €145 budget per person basically evaporates into a single night's hotel stay, leaving you literally nothing for food, ferries, or experiences.
Moving to the family verdict.
The verdict is a definitive no.
It's a hard no. Hvar Town actively, physically punishes children with its geography, and its price ladder severely punishes every additional traveler you add to the group.
It just doesn't work.
If you absolutely insist on going because you simply have to see the yachts, you must base yourselves in Jelsa or Vrboska. But honestly, as we discussed, Kurila or even the island of Brač are infinitely better value family islands that offer the exact same Adriatic water without the hostility to strollers and family budgets.
Next is the luxury tier traveler. The verdict is a resounding yes.
This is where Hvar still definitively wins. If you have the budget, properties like the Hotel Amphora, the Palace Elizabeth, or a private villa with a chef truly delivered a top-tier Mediterranean week.
They really do.
At €550 per person per day, you are getting an experience that is entirely comparable to Capri or St. Tropez, but at roughly 70% of the cost of Capri. Plus, you get arguably better sailing access out to the Pakleni archipelago in Vis.
And finally, the digital nomad or solo long-term traveler. The verdict is yes, with calendar-based conditions.
Strictly calendar-based, yes, but only from October through April. By basing yourself in Stari Grad or Jelsa, an €800 a month studio and strong fiber internet make it a highly viable, profoundly beautiful place to work remotely.
But in the summer, the economic conversion of long-term rentals into short-term tourist beds makes the cost of living explode.
The economic eviction.
The economic eviction makes it financially unviable overnight. You must plan your stay as a shoulder season or off-season nomad only.
When you look at all these verdicts together, it really connects perfectly back to the Croatian government's initiative we talked about in segment 1, that quality over quantity mandate.
It has been a success from that perspective.
The island is doing exactly what it set out to do politically and economically. It is aggressively, intentionally pricing out the bottom tiers and actively catering to the top.
It's a harsh reality to accept if you remember the cheap backpacker days of the early 2000s, but an undeniable one. Hvar has decided exactly what kind of island it wants to be in 2026, and it expects you to pay the premium to participate in that vision.
Which leaves me with one final, somewhat unsettling thought to ponder before we wrap up.
What's that?
As these elite Mediterranean islands, from Hvar to Capri to Mykonos, continue to relentlessly raise their prices, enforce fines, and tightly curate their visitors to filter out the masses, are we looking at a future where access to the Adriatic's most famous, most beautiful historic sites simply becomes a gated luxury community rather than a shared piece of global heritage?
That is a deep thought to leave on.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.